The biggest Furry Fandom Iceberg explained. Alright, if you're watching this series in order, you know the deal by now. If you want to start at the beginning, however, check the linked video in the card. Otherwise, let's dig deeper into this ongoing series. SCP-1471. The SCP Foundation is a wiki that was created in 2008 for the purpose of having multiple users cobble together supernatural entities and collate them in one location. The idea is that the organization, SCP, is tasked with securing, containing, and protecting these entities. Any given entry will be written by a random individual, with countless spin-offs in other media having sprung up over the years, in particular video games. Each entity is given a number, with 1471 being an SCP in the form of a mobile application called Malo, which sends the user who installed it on their phone images of areas that they frequent. All images that are sent contain 1471-A, described as a large humanoid figure with canid-like skull and black hair. After several days of this, users will have -A, affectionately called Malo by some fans of SCP, attempting to communicate with them, though users will be unable to understand the entity. Additionally, the entry on the SCP website notes that Malo is not hostile in any capacity. 1471-A has become very popular over the years in furry, with tons of fan art of them made, as well as fanfic and even fursuits. The photo included with the entry is an edited version of Taryn Griff's deviant art photo called Don't Open the Door, which, believe it or not, is of their fursuit named Brains the Zombie Werewolf, a suit made by Carousel, which debuted at Eurofurence 17 all the way back in 2011. This is also notable since Taryn Griff was totally cool with people using the photo for the SCP entry. 1471-A is a common part of furry meme culture, kind of like Purro from Changed. Housepets. Housepets is a webcomic by Rick Griffin, which began serialization in 2008 and runs weekly on the site housepetscomic.com. Griffin came up with the idea in 2006 and ran with it, going on to win the Ursa Major Award for Best Anthropomorphic Comic Strip 11 years, almost consecutively, between 2009 and 2020. With the comic not receiving a nomination in 2018. It's a sitcom-style webcomic that centers around the pets that populate the neighborhood known as Babylon Gardens. Rather quickly, the comic seems to have devolved from a slice-of-life sitcom strip into a series that is fairly mature, with an expansive universe including cosmic beings, human-anthro relations, and more. Rick Griffin announced in 2021 that the current story arc will be the last one, after which Housepets will undergo some sort of rebrand. As of this recording, it's still running weekly, so go check it out if you haven't. Toby Fox. Toby Fox is a musician, artist, and game developer known perhaps best for Undertale and Deltarune. He made his name in 2008 with the release of the Earthbound Halloween hack, then, from 2009 onward, with his music compositions for Homestuck. He kickstarted Undertale in 2013 and released the game in 2015. Deltarune was then released in 2018, 2021, with 3 more chapters forthcoming. He's worked on numerous game soundtracks since, including both Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Toby Fox is notable in furry thanks to the number of characters appearing in his works over the years that have been anthro. Some may think of the Undertale character So Sorry, but that character was actually bought through the Kickstarter by a furry named Samael D. Butterdragon, and is based on their Sona. But no, I'm saying look at the number of anthro characters, specifically anthro animal characters, in his works. This is another example of someone making anthro art where Redditors have hemmed and hawed over the years as to whether he's a furry or not, whether his works are furry or not. But let's be honest, most of that is some kind of discomfort at enjoying something that might be considered furry, because it's too good, it's too relatable, and, all that kind of stuff. But, sorry, either way, Toby Fox's works have been adopted by furries. Andrew Hussie. Andrew Hussie is an artist and author, perhaps, definitely, best known for Homestuck. the multimedia web series that ran from 2009 to 2016, as well as its numerous spin-offs. Hussie began with earlier webcomics posted on his page, MS Paint Adventures, and then ran Homestuck for 8 years, then worked on video game sequels, text-only epilogues, and oversaw a sequel series. Most recently, they released a visual novel known as Cyclonials, a commentary on American politics, which is, I'm pretty sure, the only Husnasty thing I haven't properly read or played. Like Toby Fox, with whom they worked for some time, again, with Fox doing music for Homestuck, and with Fox coding the earlier parts of Undertale in Hussie's basement. Hussie has created a multitude of characters who are anthro, or, perhaps more notably here, are furries. Like, without giving context that might provide spoilers, one of the characters introduced in Homestuck 2 is literally named Yiffany. Regardless, also like Fox, people have often debated whether or not Hussie is a furry themselves. The notable thing here is that more than a few times Hussie has been photographed at FurCons, in one case with Sonic Fox. People go to the point of chalking this up to trolling, because, nobody ever knows what's actually going on with Hussie. Regardless, whatever the case, Hussie's work, just like Fox's, have had an impact on creating more furries and leading many young people to explore self-expression through art and anthro alike. Fishies. Okay, this one's a little contentious. What exactly this type of furry ought to be called? Basically, if you got furries, scalies, and avians, what do you call those whose sonas are fish-based? And the name might be kind of contentious because they're not all that common, to be honest. Aquatic mammals like whales and dolphins might appear sometimes, but outside of sharks, fish aren't really that often seen in the fandom. Those who do appear are pretty popular though. I'm gonna go with fishies, though I've also seen aquatics and scalies, but if you have a different idea, drop it below. Mark Merlino. Mark Merlino is one of the founders of the modern furry fandom, if you will. He helped organize room parties at fan conventions in the 1980s, which later grew into the first furry conference. In these room parties, a lot of early American fandom members met up and discussed anthropomorphics. Specifically, Rod O'Reilly and Mark Merlino hosted a room party at WesterCon 1985, while fellow early fandom member Steve Gallacci did sketches of anthros at the party. From that point on, O'Reilly and Merlino hosted anthro room parties at every convention they attended, according to Merlino, including the first furry party at a sci-fi convention outside the US, this one being at Worldcon 1987 in Brighton, UK. I actually spoke with Mark Merlino about his history with the furry fandom to help me fill out this entry. In 1988, Merlino suggested a themed convention, with the convention, Conference Zero, occurring the following year. Merlino, in our discussion, was quick to say, quote, "Rod and I and our friends did not invent funny animals, nor did we have anything to do with the people who are fans of animal characters. What we did is provide a place for anyone who liked these characters to gather. We did it on purpose. We actively spent our time and money promoting the idea and providing places to gather." So that explains, from my and others' perspective, why we are considered the founders of furry fandom. Would someone else have done the same thing? Possibly, but we actually did it. Merlino has remained an active member of the fandom, hosting regular furry parties at the Prancing Skill Tear with his housemates. He still attends conventions, and is well known to this day thanks to his outspoken nature and willingness to engage with the media and interviewers, just like this. Steve Gallacci. Steve Gallacci was another early member of the fandom, perhaps best known for penning what some consider the first truly furry comic, at least by design, Albedo Anthropomorphics. Once again, I was able to speak with Steve Gallacci to help me fill out this entry a lot more, so definitely thanks to him for that. He was inspired by independent comics from the mid to late 1970s, and an idea to do something similar to Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century, which he initially referred to as Astroduck. Thanks to his history in the US Air Force, this evolved into a harder sci-fi combat comic starring Irma Felna, an anthro-cat officer in the Extraplanetary Defense Force, and revolving around the conflicts into which this corps gets involved. Gallacci was selected to be a graphics specialist in the Air Force, which he told me informed the office politics of Albedo, as well as stirring up his interest in politics and world events due to being stationed in West Germany during the latter Cold War. While already a fair artist, his time as a graphics specialist gave him the experience in publication production that would assist him in self-publishing the first issues of Albedo in the coming years. The first issue was released in 1984, and continued publication until 2005, when Gallacci took an indefinite hiatus from the series following his wife's diagnosis with cancer. Also of note is that Mark Merlino explained to me that some have claimed Gallacci's art being present at Boston Worldcon 1980 may have been the first time Anthro characters appeared in a convention art show, though Mark says he disbelieves this. Also, Mark mentioned that the room parties that germinated into the modern fandom were known as Gallacci group gatherings, though Gallacci says this is overstating his part in these room parties. In other words, Gallacci had a major impact on the early aesthetics of the fandom, as well as being a driving force behind the idea that visual anthropomorphic stories could be told in a serious manner. Once again, special thanks to Steve Gallacci for providing an interview on this section. Fred Patten. Fred Patten was another of the prominent early members of the fandom, as well as being recognized for introducing anime to America in a lot of cases. On that note, Fred Patten co-founded the CFO, or the Cartoon and Fantasy Organization, with Mark Merlino, an organization founded in 1977 for the purpose of appreciating Japanese animation. A sci-fi fan from a young age, Patten began attending conventions as a teenager in the late 50s and into the 60s. He was a major player in multiple parts of the fandom, including but not limited to co-founding the Anthropomorphic Literature and Arts Association in 2001, which administers the Ursa Major Awards, acting as the editor for one of the fandom's largest amateur press associations, Rauerbrazil, from 1989 to 2005, contributing to multiple other APAs and zines, writing and compiling fiction collections for the fandom, and documenting fandom history, particularly within the realm of conventions. Fred Patten was an important name whose extensive writings can serve as a record of the fandom, as well as an entry point for anime, furry, and general fandom. Furry Auction 1992. Furry Auction 1992 refers to a video filmed in 1992, uploaded to YouTube in 2009, and then gaining virality as a meme in 2020. The video concerns a Pennsylvania TV station, WITF-TV, which hosted regular art auctions, and on which a particular painting was sold. The piece in question is named Stay Up Late, and was painted by Brian Swords, aka Biohazard, who offered paintings for the art auction between 1988 and 1993. Stay Up Late in particular gained notoriety in 2020 thanks to the recording of its auction in which the hosts attempt to overlook the adult nature of the painting, which includes a bottle of lubricant and two buck-naked rats in bed together. Additionally, late-night host John Oliver purchased the painting that same year, providing it further prominence, due to his presenting it on his show. Though it should be noted that Stay Up Late is only one of the pieces for the auction in that 1992 clip, which were created by Biohazard. It's also of note that Biohazard's channel contains recordings of multiple of the other year's auctions, where you can see their other work that was auctioned in the same way. Ultimately, complaints to the station about the increasingly lewd nature of Biohazard's work had their paintings from 1993 pulled from auction, and this ultimately ended their relationship with the station and the art auction. Quadsuits. Quadsuits are fursuits which are quadrupedal rather than bipedal, meaning that the person wearing one must walk on all fours to move appropriately. They're rather rare compared to the more common bipedal suits, but still common enough that you'll see them somewhat regularly. It's of note that quadsuits, being a specialty type of fursuit, can typically run more expensive than a standard fursuit, which is usually already in the thousands. They require additional skills for maneuvering, as a single person wears a quadsuit rather than two people, like with a pantomime horse. They end up looking, in a lot of cases, more realistic and less cartoony when it comes to representing your animal of choice, providing a different experience than typical fursuiting. Amorous. Amorous is a furry dating sim that gained some notoriety upon release in 2018 thanks to its expansive and risque nature. The player character visits Club Amorous with their brother and then has the option to date 9 love interests. And then you get, love scenes? Yeah, let's go with that. Amorous is notable for its character customization, the amount of, content, and because it's free on both itch.io and Steam. I have not played it myself, but I do know about it due to its sheer amount of notoriety. Adastra. Adastra is another furry dating sim / romance visual novel, which I've heard described as the most emotionally rich YIF visual novel to ever exist. I have no personal experience here, but enough osmosis exposure thanks to how popular it's been in the last few years. The game was developed in the visual novel software Ren'Py by the Echo Project, who have made multiple other visual novels as well, and it was released between 2018 and 2020, first with Echo Project backers and then publicly. Adastra centers around a wolf boy named Amicus, who kidnaps the main character from Earth and takes them back to his home planet, Adastra, where they get stuck for a while and the main character gets wrapped up in the affairs of Amicus's home and family. It's notable for how, again, emotionally rich it is, as well as the quality of art and storytelling on display. Blacksad. Blacksad is a comic series in a film noir style, penned by, I apologize for mispronouncing these ahead of time, Juan Diaz-Canales, and illustrated by Juanjo Guarnido. It's a series of short stories following John Blacksad. No, that's not following the meme. His name is actually John Blacksad, a cat detective living in the American 1950s who investigates the types of crimes you'd expect from a post-World War II hard-boiled detective. The comics are originally released in French, but the books have been released in a number of languages, including the author's native Spanish and, of course, English. So far, the series has been running since 2000, with 7 books released, multiple more planned, and a video game adaptation in 2019. Dogpatch Press. Dogpatch Press is an online furry newspaper which has been running since 2014, and has been instrumental in the development of many entries in this series up to this point. It was meant for the purpose of posting furry news and interviews with prominent fandom members, including Biohazard from earlier on this layer. The site is run by Patch O Fur, who started the site after posting on flayrah, another news site, from 2012 to 2014. However, according to Patch, in 2014, the editor was very occupied with running other sites. A long backlog of my stories built up and held back what I wanted to do. I didn't want to put brakes on my writing hobby, so I made this for an outlet to rev it up higher. The site's updated regularly with the majority of its contents written by Patch, with Fred Patten contributing prior to his passing in 2018, as well as contributions from Pup Matthias in 2016 to 2017. Additionally, Dogpatch Press has been featured extensively in the media, with Patch providing interviews and having their work quoted regularly by popular publications. Check them out if you haven't already, and if you want to learn more about current fandom goings-on. Furry Councilman. Furry Councilman refers to Scott Chamberlain, aka Grey Muzzle, a member of the City Council in New Milford, Connecticut. Chamberlain served 1 term on the City Council and, prior to the following election season, was outed by his political opposition as a furry. Chamberlain had not been secretive about his involvement in the fandom whatsoever, owning and posting photos in multiple fursuits, as well as publishing a webcomic titled Tina's Story. At the time of this story breaking in 2017, Chamberlain acquired the nickname the Furry Councilman, and many a news article were penned decrying how he was removed from office due to being a furry. In fact, the mayor of New Milford was the one who asked Chamberlain to resign once his So Furry profile was made public, with the mayor going on to say he was not ousted due to being a furry, but due to the sexual nature of some of his postings on So Furry, particularly one of the activities listed under his tolerated tags there. Ultimately, the Furry Councilman is a meme that loses the truth behind it due to the snappy headlines written at the time, but where the articles under those headlines pretty explicitly state what was actually going on, like 2 paragraphs into each of them. Additionally, it should be noted that Chamberlain was fairly open after the fact about how ridiculous it would be to hide one's interest in furry simply for being a public servant, that it's a hobby, and for some an identity, and that it should not be hidden due to the ignorance of the majority. Christian furs. According to Fur Science, about 25% of furries who participated in their study on religion and spirituality claim to be Christian. The label Christian fur does not apply to any and all Christian furries, however. This label is typically exclusive to furries whose personas and artistic output are representative of this status as Christian. There are organizations like the Christian Furry Fellowship, which explicitly describes itself as a Christian, evangelical, missional, and post-denominational organization, though they are quick to point out that the word evangelical here does not require them to proselytize. Though I would be remiss to not note that in 2015, following the Supreme Court's ruling on Obergefell versus Kasich, they posted an article expressing their opinions about same-sex relationships and marriage. There are plenty of Christian furs, and while news articles on the topic will try to depict the label as something of an oxymoron, I suppose, implying that Christian furs and non-Christian furs don't really get along, to be honest, this is a really, really big fandom with lots of diverse individuals and groups, and frankly, that kind of friction is probably overblown, but if you have personal experience with this, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be really curious to learn more. Coming out as a furry. This refers to the concept of coming out of the closet, in the sense of being queer, in this case where it comes to being a furry. As with some other points on this iceberg, reactions to this idea run the gamut. Some see furry as just a hobby, and question the point of coming out about it. In the common opinion that I've seen here, it's a private matter that's genuinely a choice, unlike being queer. So why bother bringing other people into your hobby if they don't ask about it? In this case, it's like coming out as someone who's into anime or fishing. On the opposite side, people see coming out as a furry as a step toward better understanding of the fandom and openness between the person coming out and their family or friends, especially if it's somebody who's underage and needs transportation to a fur con or something like that. Overall though, it's kind of a big meme given how polarizing opinions are on the idea of coming out as a furry, and how extreme some stories about coming out or being closeted can be. But do you have any interesting stories about this? Fox in the Stable. Fox in the Stable is a meme which spun out from an animation by the artist Toby Fox. Fox in the Stable refers to an animation of the same name, which is notable for its adult content, which happens between a horse and a fox, and it occurs in a stable. It's also used as an example often of, if you get this, you've gone too far. I've placed it this high on the iceberg due to its recency, so it's still a pretty common meme in furry. Yes, if you do recognize this background or this combination of images, you have gone too far. After all, you're 4 hours into this thing. Of course, this is not Toby Fox's only animation by far, but for some reason, this became the one that everyone latched onto as a giant meme. Zabivaka. Right up front, apologies for mispronouncing this if I am, because I don't speak Russian. Zabivaka was the Russian mascot for the 2018 FIFA World Cup, whose name, which again I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, translates to the one who scores, which, oh boy, if you recall the Australian Olympic mascots from the previous layer, yeah, Zabivaka is the one who scores. I want to note here, Wikipedia instead says his name is a portmanteau of dog and to strike. So, look, I'm not even going to pretend that I understand Russian or how this compound word works. Zabivaka was selected through an online competition to pick a new mascot for the World Cup, which launched in 2016. In October of that year, Zabivaka was unveiled, and then furry Twitter did its thing. Yeah, you can basically assume where this one is going, and you've pretty much got it right. Sea Salt. Sea Salt is probably the most popular character by furry artist Red Rusker, a self-described gay furry porn artist. Hope you enjoyed this smut. Sea Salt is another one of those characters that's become a meme due to his commonality in Red Rusker's work, and due to the popularity of cropped GIF memes. Yeah, it's like a match made in heaven. Also, Sea Salt is well known due to the popularity of smut. Let's be honest, just not even the cropped variety, just, It's also probably because clothed images of Sea Salt make him seem like a bashful little boingy boof. And kind of like Fox in the Stable, only those who have seen him will recognize him in a clothed state, and then immediately have the reaction that can only be embodied in this emoji, frankly. This one's also funny to me given how upfront Red Rusker is about creating smut, meaning that the slightest bit of research makes one understand immediately what's going on with this little guy. If furries are animals, then we. This phrase refers to some variation on the anti-furry meme message, if furries are animals, then we should have the right to hunt them, or kill them, or eat them, or something to that effect. It's mostly repeated by, let's be honest, tryhards on Reddit and sites like iFunny, and it's one of those phrases that, for some reason, attained viral meme status. It's seemingly often attributed to this fake tweet from Michael from Vsauce. It's perhaps popular because it's a catchy phrase which can be recognized solely by its first half. If furries are animals, ... Or because perhaps most furry hate is unoriginal repetitions of the same couple of phrases and talking points. Or because perhaps the combination of edge inherent in the idea of killing members of a group that you don't like and the strawman that furries want to be animals, it's kind of like the perfect, unironic combination for people who just don't understand this subculture. If you really dissect the phrase, it almost comes off as hyperbole. I mean to say, it's like a parody phrase that someone accidentally took seriously. Either way, it's on this iceberg thanks to it still being somewhat popular, though in all fairness, instances of the phrase do seem to be waning. TheDealersDen.com. The Dealer's Den is a furry auction website which has been running since 2009. It was originally administered by Sinabu, until it was bought by Vitae Slade in 2018. In some ways, The Dealer's Den is the place online to buy and sell premium furry goods, namely artwork, clothing, and fursuits, though other categories are included as well. But let's be honest, it's mainly about the fursuits. The important thing to remember is that these are not just pre-made pieces, but makers will also sell commissions for fursuits and artwork and so on. Sure, as a maker, you could sell your stuff on Etsy, eBay, and other similar sites, but the thing that sets the Dealer's Den apart is that it doesn't charge listing fees, final value fees, or general seller's fees. The Dealer's Den was not the first furry auction site, with earlier sites like Furbuy existing for almost 2 decades, but at this point, the Dealer's Den is kind of the primary one. It's notable also for being the platform on which at least one record-breaking auction has occurred, but we'll get into that later. GMod. GMod is short for Garry's Mod, and is a 2006 sandbox game released exclusively on Steam, which allows players to spawn and manipulate objects at will within Valve's Source engine. The game was built as a source mod in 2004, but was eventually picked up by the company itself and released as its own game in 2006. Given that it was originally a mod and later a full game built in Source, many of the base assets available in-game were derived from contemporary Valve games, also built in Source, namely Half-Life 2, though over the years numerous custom assets have been added to the game, as well as providing the opportunity for players to add their own assets. Very notably and very recently, GMod is directly responsible for a portion of recent meme lord Maxwell's popularity, thanks to the creation of a GMod asset based on the original picture of Maxwell. We've spoken in previous layers about current and long-running games which were played heavily by furries and used for self-expression. GMod is here thanks to the amount of storytelling and chaos that the game allows for, and the number of YouTubers, namely people like Miss Breezy, who have made content in GMod over the years. True, Miss Breezy may fit more into the brony community than technically the furry community, but it gets the point across. And a lot of furry GMod content on YouTube is actually anti-furry stuff. What's more, furry servers in GMod have existed for quite a while now, and still seem to be around. Like with Second Life, GMod allowed from an early point in the 2000s the freedom of expression in a 3D space that a lot of furries might have been looking for. $20,000 custom. $20,000 custom refers to the well-covered purchase of an adoptable from the DeviantArt group The Gremcore by user Caravan Outpost. Grem Species co-creator Toothless Ego started an auction for a custom character, beginning at $800. Caravan Outpost skyrocketed that price to $20,500, and soon after purchased another $3,000 adoptable from the same group. Once the custom was finally revealed, the whole community based around the species was upset about how supposedly shoddy the design looked. Later, Caravan Outpost explained that they were experiencing a manic episode during this purchase, and that they were the one who asked the custom to be rushed, leading to its shoddy design. As a result, others in the community began to question if the community owners and auctioneers were taking advantage of Caravan Outpost's mental illness. This is just a brief summary though. This whole incident has been well covered in other YouTube videos, so check those out if you want further detail on what happened. Rave music videos. Rave music videos can refer to a few different things. Either videos of raves which occur at furry conventions, music videos of EDM songs that have been adopted by furries, which typically are still images of rave-themed furry art, or music videos from furry musicians who produce EDM. Similar to animation memes, rave music videos are a part of furry YouTube that served as an entry part to the fandom for some, while being completely ignored or not even known about by others. It also seems to be a mostly dead genre of YouTube videos, except for videos of FurCon raves, because those videos still pop up all the time. But it's still an interesting niche part of fandom history from the early days of YouTube. Ursa Major Awards. The Ursa Major Awards are a set of awards for anthro art and media first administered in 2001, as we mentioned before, at the behest of Fred Patten. The awards are controlled by the Anthropomorphic Literature and Arts Association, and were set up for furries to have their own series of awards to uplift art of high quality, kind of as an analog to the Hugo Awards, among others. In order to qualify, pieces of art must include anthro characters, be released within the calendar year being considered, and that's actually pretty much it. What makes the Ursa Major Awards unique among other awards of this type is that anyone can nominate and vote for participants. Instead of walling off the process and making it so that only members of the ALAA may nominate or vote, anyone may participate. This means that you'll see a diverse mix of works by internet celebrities and big budget movies, games, and graphic novels side by side. It's truly a free-for-all in this regard. Also of note is the number of categories, including Best Graphic Story, Comic Strip, Magazine, Illustration, Website, Anthropomorphic Music, Fursuit, and a bunch more, honestly. If you're looking for what the fandom and the ALAA decide to uphold as the best of each year, definitely give the Ursa Major Awards a look, and maybe even consider nominating and voting in it next year. Good Furry Award. The Good Furry Award is another annual award, this one founded in 2019 by Grubs Grizzly. Grubs has run the advice site Ask Papa Bear since 2012, and founded the Good Furry Award for the purpose of uplifting those who offer positive contributions to the fandom and who present it well to the public. As he puts it, it seems to me that every time something negative happens in the fandom, people focus on that too much to the point of giving the entire fandom a bad reputation. Rather than paying attention to the few furries who cause trouble, I would like us all to focus on furries who do good things and are good people. Let's give those furries some attention instead. The vast majority of furries are good people, and I want us all to start talking about them and thinking about them. My hope is to uplift this community. It's not so much about the final award, although that is important. It's about taking serious time to bring good furries to light. Past winners are Dog Bomb, who won posthumously and was given the award due to his participation in rallies, fundraising, and more during his lifetime. Ash Coyote for her contributions to fandom history and understanding through her film The Fandom, as well as her other YouTube output. Cassidy Civet, thanks to her presentation of the fandom through YouTube and TikTok, as well as her music career. And Soatok Dole, thanks to his helping raise funds for a local library, which had its funding pulled by the city mayor due to its offering LGBT+ books. The Good Furry Award has grown in presence over the years, with the 2023 nominee list being the longest yet. Go check out Papa Bear's work on his blog, as well as the Good Furry Award, and again, maybe even consider nominating someone if you have anyone in mind next year. All the Single Furries. All the Single Furries is a 2014 parody of Beyonce's Single Ladies, Put a Ring on It. This video is sometimes regarded as the worst thing to ever come out of the fandom, with it being considered kind of a challenge to watch the 10-hour version of this video, though I'm not sure anyone has ever seriously taken on that challenge. This one is this weird, cryptic anomaly though. The video was supposedly shot by Easy Wolf, a pro cinematographer and filmmaker, and the music was supposedly recorded by Fox Amor, but it was uploaded to an alt account of somebody named Evil Saib. This contemporary Dogpatch Press article lists Easy Wolf as the maker as well, but how did we get to this point? I found a separate listing for the video on this website, Unlisted Videos, and sure enough, through a little more digging, I was able to find the original video archived on the Internet Archive, on Easy Wolf's YouTube channel, though it was already unlisted by 2015. However, the interesting thing is that the description for the original upload gives credit to Easy Wolf and Shay, not Fox Amor. How did Fox's name even get attached to this in the first place? Because anywhere that you look, he's the one who gets credit for the music. Perhaps we'll investigate this further at a later date. Just beware, all ye who enter here. Furry music. Furry music is the concept of furries who make music. If you're in this deep and you're a music enjoyer, you've probably found at least a handful of furry musicians you like. Some more popular folks include Nice, the above-mentioned Cassidy the Civet and Fox Amor, Pepper Coyote, Russell Buck, and some of my favorites, like Goji, Salve the Dog, and Male Pup, those last two being different names for the same artist. Furry music runs the gamut, from singer-songwriter material to speedcore and gabber, and basically literally everything in between. The only requirement is that you be a furry. Some furry musicians don't even use their fursona to represent themselves in their music career. Plus, on the off chance that you found this channel through my music rather than my Iceberg or Twitch content, you already know that this applies to me too. Speaking from personal experience, I can say that creating a fursona for the sake of making art and having a character to play can help significantly with giving you direction and cohesion among your work. Basically, think of digital bands like Gorillaz, make it furry, and you get the idea. $20,000 YCH. $20,000 YCH refers to the high prices charged by artist Miles DF on a regular basis, particularly for his Your Character Here's, or YCH's. Miles DF is a professional artist whose work is appreciated and respected by many, but whose YCH prices are generally scoffed at least publicly. Though, truly, he makes it work. I mean, people pay for his work, you know? The YCH prices of his that are shared around are often several $1,000s a piece, while the $20,000 YCH in question is a 17-slot group photo, which is so wildly NSFW, I could not possibly show it here, with the most expensive slot in that picture being $4,250, and with all slots totaling to $19,100. So it's not quite $20,000, but you get the idea, that just sounds better. His YCHs are notable as a meme thanks to how people will often react to them, which is remarkable thanks to how it points out a little bit of a catch-22 if you ask me. The advice you'll always see as a furry artist is don't sell yourself short. Charge what you deserve to get paid. But if you think you're worth that much, then you're going to become the butt of all the jokes, more or less. Shark girls. Shark girls are a popular meme fursona online. Though similar to cat girls, shark girls are not always full-on anthros. A lot of the time, shark girls are human, except for having shark tails. In other cases, though, they are full-on fishies, or whatever we've decided the term for that is, probably being the most popular species of fishy, to be honest. Like with cat girls and cat boys, shark boys do exist, but shark girls are definitely the more popular of the options. They were probably somewhat boosted in popularity by shark girl VTuber Gargura, who debuted in 2020, though the search trend has remained fairly stable across years, even before her debut as a VTuber. Artist Amorous, creator of the character Erica, claims that Erica's creation likely influenced a lot of shark girls, but even Amorous isn't sure where the overall bursting forth of shark girls came from. Regardless of their origin, though, stick around long enough on furry Twitter or similar places and you'll run into your fair share of shark girls. ERP. ERP is short for erotic roleplay, though I did find people claiming it's short for explicit roleplay. Either way, it's a mainstay of internet culture, and as you can imagine based on that description, a mainstay of furry culture. It's basically roleplay with the express purpose of getting saucy. Several places have been around for a long time, including Tapestry's Muck, which has been online since 1991, and F-List, itself online since 2009, or even VRChat, which, while not an all-inclusive list, are some of the more popular places that this activity occurs. Honestly, there's really not a ton to say about this, other than it's important to know what ERP stands for, so that if you encounter that acronym in the wild, you can know what you're getting into, and either to avoid or engage at will. House party. Okay, think of a room party, like at a convention, and move that concept to a private residence. Then you have a house party. The previously mentioned Prancing Skill Tier regularly hosts house parties for the purpose of furries getting together and mingling with other like-minded people. That's just one example though. Furry house parties happen all over the place all the time. They can be regularly occurring events, like at the Prancing Skill Tier, or one-off events. As with a lot of ephemeral entries on this iceberg, they're definitely not exclusive to furry. I mean, the chances that you've been to a house party at some point in your life, you know that these are just a thing. But they're important to furry, especially since the fandom sprung out of room and house parties in the first place. Additionally, I'm not actually sure how many other fandoms specifically have house parties as an integral part of their history and culture. Like, have I just been completely unaware of weeb house parties all these years? Fragile heterosexuality. Fragile heterosexuality is the concept in psychology that it is easier to lose one's status or perception of the self as heterosexual than it is for any other flavor of sexuality. This is likely because of the amount of discrimination perpetrated against minorities. That's one theory at least. In this case, sexual minorities, meaning that the majority favors a type of purity, essentially. In other words, if someone participates in thoughts or activities considered not straight even once, they could risk being expelled from the majority. Conversely, if a queer person were to have a quote-unquote straight experience, even once or multiple times, they would still remain in the minority. Basically, straight folks who hold prejudice against sexual minorities would still consider them queer. So it's a double standard, essentially, which may explain the overreactions that can be associated with experience of any type of queerness. Here's the thing with furry. As we've already established, furry is extremely gay. It's been that way from day one, and it will never not be that way, regardless of what some people would like you to believe. This is the part where it just becomes conjecture on my part. This is how I associate it with furry. Naturally, even if you're straight, if you lump yourself in with furries, you're likely to receive some amount of hate thanks to this association with queerness. It would explain why a lot of people who hold these prejudices are violently repulsed from engaging with furry or furries themselves. In my opinion, the more social credibility you have, and the more in the majority you are, the less likely you probably are to examine or challenge your identity. After all, if you're straight and you've been trained socially to accept heterosexuality as 1, the majority group, and 2, the norm, why would you purposely and actively challenge that and consider that you might be anything otherwise? If you came out of that finding that something else were the truth, you would instantly lose some of your status, essentially. I say this because I met plenty of men in my life who either have queer partners, sometimes even non-binary partners, or who express some level of same-sex attraction in private, but who publicly claim straightness. Obviously, I cannot speak for anyone personally, but to bring it all back together, the idea of fragile heterosexuality makes me wonder, do people like this, particularly assumedly straight men, avoid places like the furry fandom, and in fact militantly fight against it in some cases, because they're afraid of what being a furry will do to them? That the comfortability with sexuality and gender may finally crack their egg, and they're just really uncomfortable with that idea. Because truly, the furry fandom has cracked plenty of eggs. Nekojishi. Nekojishi is another visual novel, this time developed by Studio Klondike, which revolves around a young man raised in a religious family who attends college and suddenly becomes able to see the spirits and gods of the world, which includes 3 big catboys. Ultimately, it's a gay visual novel where you get the chance to date said catboys, and it's been very well received with a 3D sequel kickstarted in 2020 and coming soon. The original game, as far as I can tell, is safe for work, with an NSFW patch available, meaning that it can be wholesome or horny, according to your preference. Also, it should be noted this is not Klondike's only game, but perhaps their most well-known. Non-American fandom. That's right. Americans may not realize it, but furry is actually a worldwide phenomenon, and has been for a very long time now. In fact, a lot of what we've discussed up to this point has been very Amerocentric, but a lot of it does apply to the fandom globally. We've already discussed some individuals living in other parts of the world, but the fandom actually went global fairly early on, spreading to the UK and Australia as early as the 1980s, with Eurofurence beginning in 1995, and it just kind of took off from there. In more recent years, furry conventions have cropped up on all inhabited continents, with numerous all over the place. It's easy, since English is one of, if not the, current lingua franca of the world, to assume that America is the center of attention when it comes to furry. And while we might have the largest cons, and we might have technically started the whole thing way back when, it spread globally much quicker than others may realize. And a lot of the material in other languages may be simply inaccessible because it's not available in English. This doesn't stop with conventions though, as some of the most influential members of the fandom, especially early on, were actually not Americans, but we'll get to them later. Flayrah. Flayrah is another furry news website, this one founded in 2001 by Arith. As with a lot of older furry sites, it ran on and off in the early days. In this case, Arith writes that he lost interest in the site around 2004 to 2005, until Frisco took it over in 2006. It should be noted that Arith became the con chairperson at Midwest Fur Fest in 2002 to 2003, and then its publications director. Both of them decided to let the site die in 2009, posting about it on the site itself. In early 2010, GreenReaper, who provided an interview for this portion and the three following, offered to take over the site and relaunch it. GreenReaper has remained the editor-in-chief until present. When it was announced in 2001, Flayrah, which takes its name from the rabbit speech language of Watership Down and means food of princes or unusually good food, the site was pitched as the premier news portal for the furry fandom. It was noted that the site was influenced by Slashdot. GreenReaper asked to continue running the site in 2010, stating that it was too full of historical content and promise to simply disappear. As of now, the site is regularly nominated in the Ursa Major Awards for Best Anthro Magazine. Today, Flayrah remains a mainstay of furry news and media, and you should consider checking it out if you haven't already. InkBunny. InkBunny is an art site which hosts both general and mature furry artwork. Upon launch in 2010, the site was led by Starling, who operated the site until 2013 when, like the previous entry, GreenReaper offered to assume control. Unlike with Flayrah, GreenReaper had acted as a mod of InkBunny prior to taking over as admin. GreenReaper explained that he had become an honorary mod from the beginning, thanks to providing security advice when asked for feedback during the site's beta testing phase. Over time, his role expanded into providing input on site policies and features, before eventually becoming the admin. The site has remained an important part of the furry art community online, winning Best Website at the 2017 Ursa Major Awards. The thing that set InkBunny apart initially was the ability for artists to easily sell digital downloads and prints of their work, which was of note when launched thanks to the adult content allowed on the site. The site is also notable nowadays for supporting keyword blocking and suggestions, larger than average file sizes, account renaming, and more. WikiFur. WikiFur was the first large furry project run by GreenReaper, this one launching all the way back in 2005. At the time, GreenReaper was writing articles for Wikipedia, including one on the fictional setting, The Blind Pig. While writing this particular article, he was inspired to create a wiki for the furry fandom itself. His motivation at the time is summed up in one of his live journal posts where he says, "Plenty of people in the furry fandom like writing about stuff, so why not get them together to do so?" After the site was launched in July 2005, it grew quickly, both through a post about the wiki on Something Awful in August of that year, and then GreenReaper distributing flyers for the wiki at Midwest Fur Fest in November. By the end of 2005, 2,500 articles were on the wiki. By April 2012, 15,000 articles were publicly available. GreenReaper told me that when WikiFur was founded, it was partially intended to override the often negative perception of the fandom, as well as cataloging its history. Essentially, WikiFur is the preeminent wiki source for the fandom. Of note is that multiple people I've interviewed over the course of researching this iceberg have questioned the credibility of a number of articles on the wiki. GreenReaper explained that WikiFur is edited by people who have, at least in theory, expertise in the topic, while Wikipedians, again, theoretically, should be able to cite any statement of fact or opinion to a reliable source, rather than trusting their own knowledge. Often this is quantified by a couple of stories in a newspaper or magazine. Many furry topics struggle to meet that bar, especially since furries avoided talking to the media. In fact, even the majority of the individuals who questioned the validity of WikiFur overall in our conversations mentioned that it's a great jumping off point for learning more about topics related to the fandom. And on that note, I have to say that a lot of the topics on this iceberg would not be as filled out, or perhaps even present in the first place, if it weren't for their presence on WikiFur and the citations housed there. It's truly an invaluable resource, and honestly, it's my opinion that everyone should do their best to learn media literacy skills in the first place, so that they can read into intent and reasoning in anything that they read, as well as being able to delve deeper into topics than the depth which articles like this may provide. GreenReaper. Alright, so let's talk about GreenReaper himself, the man who created WikiFur and who now administers one of the largest furry art sites and one of the largest furry news sites. GreenReaper found the fandom around 2004 when he began playing Furry Muck and Tapestries Muck, both of which we'll be discussing later. That same year, GreenReaper co-founded a wiki for the game series Creatures, which involves the husbandry of artificial life aliens. In fact, his persona remains to this day a Kai Norn from Creatures 2. The important thing is that around 2004, GreenReaper started exploring the fandom online, and built the skills necessary to run a wiki, skills which were used the following year to create WikiFur. From an early age, GreenReaper was interested in computer science, though he claims he wasn't the best programmer. Regardless, some of the work he did over the years for his own enjoyment was noticed by a tech company in the US. In 2005, he left his home country of the UK for a job in Michigan at said company, at which point he says he started interacting with other furries offline, mainly at conventions. Ever since, GreenReaper has been a mainstay of the fandom, operating the 3 sites mentioned prior. When on vacation and attending conventions, GreenReaper explained that he is involved in puppetry in the way that many con-goers utilize fursuiting. No-fly list. This entry refers to the recently leaked American no-fly list, which is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. It's been covered very, very thoroughly by plenty of people on this website. The no-fly list is maintained by the Terrorist Screening Center, an American government body which attempts to preemptively determine individuals who may pose a threat to airline security, and thus are supposed to, well, not be allowed to fly. The reason that the no-fly list appears here, however, is because a Swiss hacker known as Maya Arson Crimeu found and leaked a version of the list, with supposedly a pretty large amount of ease. Maya is of note due to its identity as a Therian, who has conducted multiple well-known hacks and leaks over the years, and due to its achieving meme status as the trans cat girl hacker who took down a government agency out of boredom, essentially. When asked whether it's a furry or not, Maya explained on Tumblr that, "I don't really call myself a furry, except for comedic effect, and mostly identify as a Therian, but I don't really care about being called furry because the furry community is cool and swag and epic, and I don't mind being seen as a part of it / repping them." UwU Culture. Alright, we've talked about UwU and OWO and what's this, but let's take a look back to 10 years ago, when UwU started taking off as a meme on Tumblr. Yes, I know UwU has been around for like 20 years, but specifically I want to look at 2013. I cannot for the life of me find the original post. Believe me, I looked. But back in 2013, before UwU was generally accepted online meme speak, there was a minor amount of backlash toward the term, specifically on Tumblr. Quoting from Know Your Meme, because it's like literally the only place that I could find talking about UwU culture as a thing. The term began appearing in November 2013 after a poster suggested older men were using the emoticon and typing styles deemed kawaii to manipulate teenage girls. As early as November 2nd, 2013, a Tumblr tag for the term UwU culture appeared, with many people asking what the term meant. I remember at the time that there was a decent amount of discourse around this, and that may in all honesty have just been due to who I was following, and what was appearing on my dashboard at the time. But regardless, it appears to be a mostly forgotten moment in the growth and proliferation of UwU online. It's a shame that the original post seems to be buried or lost, but again, maybe this is something we'll look more into in the future. VRChat dance clubs. VRChat dance clubs are dance clubs that exist in dedicated worlds within VRChat. Tons of these things exist, and many are open to all users, and they're just gaining more and more popularity, having been around for years at this point already. Typically, you gain access by simply friend requesting one of the event organizers, and then once they accept, you join them in their instance of the VRChat dance club. Events happen at these clubs basically all the time, with many occurring on a regular schedule. Others are scheduled one-offs hosted by VRChat dance groups. I've been on the list for a number of these things for like a year now, and I'm too much of a shut-in to actually attend any, to be honest. They're of note because these clubs will have live DJs spinning in real time for clubgoers. It's not typically just pre-recorded. And basically, as often as you would expect, said DJs and event organizers end up being furries, and furry musicians, as we talked about before. As you have already heard often, while it's not explicitly a furry phenomenon, VRChat dance clubs end up sharing a lot of space with the furry fandom. Japanese gods. As with the previous layers, which we ended off with Egyptian gods and Greek and Roman gods, the Japanese gods of ancient myth were quite often represented by animals, or were associated with animals. Similar to the Greek and Roman canons, even if a god wasn't an animal per se, animals were and are usually used to represent certain aspects of the world or the human condition, in both Japanese mythology and the indigenous religion, Shinto. You may assume that the most prominent example of this would be Amaterasu, the sun goddess who acts as the protagonist of the Capcom game Okami. In fact, Amaterasu was not historically associated with wolves, at all. Rather, two of the kanji in her name can be read as Okami, which is a homonym for the word for wolf. So it was just a play on words. As with many of the oldest gods in Shinto, again, the animistic religion endemic to Japan, Amaterasu was portrayed as human alongside her brother Susanoo, the god of storms, as well as the primordial gods, Izanami and Izanagi, the brother and sister who created the world in the first place. However, in those ancient stories, even the ones involving humans, there were plenty of beasts, such as Yamata no Orochi, the 8-headed, 8-tailed serpent slain by Susanoo. There's also Yatagarasu, or the 8-span crow, the massive crow with 3 legs, who supposedly guided the legendary first emperor of Japan, Jimmu, across the land. Those familiar with anime and the impact that Japanese mythology has had on it may also know the kitsune, the trickster fox who may shapeshift, the tanuki, the native raccoon dog who may transform parts of their body, especially their testicles, the komainu, the guardian lion dogs who are often seen outside of temples, and more, honestly. As with the previous entries, this is just another example of how anthropomorphics have existed in human culture through all of recorded history, through religion, art, and more. Thank you, everybody, for checking this one out. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is actually the 4th in a series of 10 videos, so if you have not seen the others, please check them out. I would also really appreciate it if you would drop a like or dislike, comment, a sub, any kind of interaction to help boost this video in the algorithm. Because don't forget, kids, even negative interaction still counts as interaction. Also, I think I forgot to say this last layer. Let me know if you have any suggestions for future entries on here, because I am not finished writing these things, so there is plenty of room to put more entries on here. This time around, I want to specifically give a special thanks to Mark Merlino, Steve Gallacci, and GreenReaper for their assistance in researching this video. That's everything for today, though. I appreciate everybody watching. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did or didn't, just let me know about it. I will see you next month with part 5 of the Ultimate Furry Fandom Iceberg. Have a great day, everybody.